Hi, my name is Wendy. I am a librarian at Grandview Heights Public Library. Today is the 8th of October, and I'm going to be doing a virtual book talk for you. Typically, I work in the computer area or up with a nonfiction book, so you may recognize me from up there. The books that I'm going to be talking about are all from the basement. They're for grades 4 through 12. Some are going to be for the lower grades, so 4 through 6. Some are going to be more 9 through 12. It just depends what kind of book you're looking for. Yeah, so the other thing is that if you hear any barking or whining in the background, that's just my puppies. They want to be let out back outside. So let's get through this for you so I can let them back out. The first book that I'm going to talk about today, you might have heard of. The title is Treasure Island. It's by Robert Louis Stevenson. This is sort of the epitome of a classic book. It was originally published in 1882. And this is actually where we kind of get all of the ideas for pirate stories about. So there's mutinies, there's deserted islands, there's buried treasure. The main character in this title is Jim, and his parents own an inn that's just sitting right on the English coast. And one day, an old pirate comes in, and he's kind of paranoid. He thinks people are like watching him or following him. And at one point, he actually is murdered by some fellow pirates. But Jim comes across a map that was in his possession that literally has an X marking the spot to show where the buried treasure is. So he shows the map to a physician that lives in town, a man of some wealth, and the local squire, and they decide they're going to undertake this adventure to go and find the buried treasure. So again, this is a classic novel. You've probably heard of it before. I hadn't read it until just recently. I finished it literally like 2 days ago. There's a reason why it's a classic. It's a good book. It's very adventurous. There's lots of things that happen. I can truly recommend this, and I don't recommend a lot of classic books. So again, Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. The next book that I want to talk about today is called Dragon Pearl by Yoon Ha Lee. There's a lot of different kinds of science fiction. There's like what you might call space opera, which is kind of like drama. There's like the technical one that kind of tends to be more about like how the ships work, how the science behind a series works. This is an interesting mix, because what the author's done with this is combine science fiction, so space travel, foreign worlds, all of that, with Korean folk tales. So in this, we've got Min, the main character. Right, you can see her right here on the cover. She's 13 years old and lives with her family on a planet, Jujin, and it's a pretty rough life that they have. Her family have fox spirits, so she has some special powers. She can transform herself into a fox or an inanimate object or even another person. And she also has the gift of charm, which means she can kind of influence people, maybe so that they don't see her when she enters a room, or so that they'll be less likely to question something that she says. So one day, an investigator comes to her family's home and tells them that her brother, Jun, who was a member of the Space Forces, has deserted, and they want to know if the family has any information on him, where he might be, why he is deserted, that sort of thing. And she was really good friends with her brother. He's 2 years older, and she knows that he would never desert them, because that would bring dishonor to their family, and also because he really loved being in the Space Forces. That was what he wanted to do with his life, and she was planning on joining him in a few more years. So she decides to take it on to herself she kind of runs away from home and manages to get onto the ship that he was stationed on, taking on another identity with her fox spirit. And along the way, she gets involved with like a gambling hall and pirates, and so we've got pirates in this one as well. There's just a lot of adventures and stuff that she goes through to try to find out what has happened to her brother. And again, it's a really interesting story. I really like the combination of the sci-fi and the folk tales, because Korean folk tales aren't anything that I know, that I don't know virtually nothing about. So I was actually able to learn a lot there too. And then, like I said, the combination with the sci-fi was interesting. So again, Dragon Pearl by Yoon Ha Lee. The next book that I have here is The Outsiders. This is another classic. You can see here on the cover it says that it's a 50th anniversary edition. It actually came out in 1967, so it's actually even a little bit older than 50 years old. I read it first in 1983, and this is a book that you can read at different ages of your life, and you get something different from it each time. Like I said, I read it first when I was about 13 years old. I read it again when I was in college. I just read it again for this. And sometimes when you read a book years and years later, you're like, that wasn't everything that I thought it was. The Outsiders is one of those books that really holds up. It stands the test of time. The author, S.E. Hinton, she was only 15 when she started writing this. It wasn't published until she was 18, but just the idea of like being able to create a book that young is pretty impressive. The main character in this story is Ponyboy Curtis. He lives with his brother Soda Pop and Derry. Their parents were killed a few years ago. And they and their friends, they kind of live on what would be considered the wrong side of the tracks. They're greasers, kind of like hoods. And they have pretty rough lives. They're not all the families in their area of town are poor, but at the same time, they have a good sense of family. They have a lot of good friends. The kids who live on the other side of the tracks, the good side of town, they're called the Soshas. And even though they get in trouble with the law, sometimes the money that their families have can often bail them out of trouble. So what happens is one night, Ponyboy and his friend Johnny are walking around, and so a group of 4 Soshas pull up in their car and want to start a fight. One of them is actually drowning Ponyboy, and Johnny decides he's got to, just for self-defense, to make sure that Ponyboy isn't killed, he stabs the Sosh. At that point, they realize that, they're going to be in a lot of trouble with the police, with it's going to start a gang war. They decide they're going to run away. So the rest of the story, you're going to have to read it if you want to find out. Again, it's really impressive. It really stays with you for a long time, and it's not going to take you a huge amount of time to read. It's a really tiny book. So The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. The last book that I'm going to talk about that's sort of on the younger end of the spectrum is All American Girl by Meg Cabot. You may know that there's an election coming up in the next couple weeks, so I picked a few books here, this one and then the next two, that kind of have to do with kids that are involved in politics. So some of you may know the name Meg Cabot. She's pretty well known for her Princess Diaries series, which I just adore. It's very funny, lighthearted. This book is pretty different from the last couple that I've talked about because it's just fun, enjoyable, quick read. In this case, we have the main character's name is Samantha, or Sam, and she lives in Washington, D.C. with her family. She's an artist. One afternoon, she's standing outside the studio where she goes to take art classes, and she notices this motorcade coming up the street. So this line of of black limousines or black Suburbans. That's not so unusual in Washington, D.C. because there's a lot of famous people, important people, people who need protection. the motorcade stops pretty close to where she's standing, and the president gets out. About the same time, she also notices that there's this guy like kind of lurking right near where she's standing, and he pulls out a gun and tries to shoot the president. So Sam manages to stop this whole thing. The Secret Service take out the guy who wants to shoot the president, and Sam becomes a national hero. So with all of this as well, Sam goes to to the White House and ends up, receiving like a presidential medal. And there she meets the son of the president, David, who actually is also in her art class. So there's where the story starts, where we start to get a little romance. They're constantly being thrown together, but they have different views on a lot of things. So again, All-American Girl. It's just a fun, light read, but yet a little bit of ties to like what's going on, our own election that's coming up. So the next one, like I said, is also election oriented. The Wrong Side of Right by Jen Marie Thorne. This came out about 5 years ago, and it's the story of Kate Quinn, and she lives in a small town in South Carolina with her aunt and uncle. She's only lived there for about a year because her mom was killed a year prior in an automobile accident. She has no idea who her father is. And she's really just trying to get through the school year, trying to get through life without her mom, and, pass AP Chem. So she's getting ready to go home from school one day, and her uncle calls her and tells her that she has to come straight home right away. Don't pay any attention to the reporters, don't talk to anyone. And she's not sure if this has something to do with her mom's death or what. She has no idea what's going on. So she gets home and finds out that the man who is the one of the candidates for president is actually her father. There was a blood test. He had no idea she existed. She had no idea who he was. But suddenly she's going to be thrust into his whole family. He has a wife and kids, and the campaign. And, she doesn't even know if she agrees with the politics that he stands for. So there's a lot of like kind of self-searching in this. There's a small story, a small side story as well, that's a little romance between her and the son of the current president, Andy, who's kind of known as being sort of a troublemaker, but at the same time, he's really the only person that she can talk to about some things. They're the only ones that know like what it's really like being in this fishbowl of being on a campaign and, trying to represent and be the person that everyone expects you to be, even if that's not who you are. So again, The Wrong Side of Right by Jen Marie Thorne. The last book that I have today on the election topic is called The State of Us. This came out just this year, and we have the sons of two candidates. Dean is the son of the Republican nominee for president, and his mom, he grew up in politics. His mom was a governor, so he knows what's expected of him. He's very straight-laced. He's the perfect son. Then there's Dre, the son of the Democratic nominee for president. And he is gay. He's out. He's very vocal about like what he believes in, even if it doesn't necessarily go along with what his dad's plans are for things. But Dre is going to tell you what he thinks on a particular topic. So they meet for the first time at the first debate. And, they're in the green room, they start talking, and they kind of realize that maybe they have more in common just because of the shared experience that they have. And they set up accounts on this chat app that it's completely anonymous, so no one will know who they are. They have aliases, but so that they can talk about what they're experiencing, being the sons of presidential candidates. So they keep chatting for a while, and eventually they start to fall for each other. they had the regular sort of relationship difficulties, like Dean's mom kind of thinks that Dre is a bad seed, or, you know, they're just on opposite sides of the political spectrum on a lot of topics. But on top of that, Dean's mom doesn't know that he's actually questioning his sexuality. There's also a third party candidate in this election who is this tech guru, and he is actually the person who owns the chat app that Dean and Dre are using. And so there's this threat that he's going to actually out Dean to his mom, to the whole country. And, you know, that's kind of a lot to deal with. I really enjoyed this book. It was really hard to put down. Like I said, it just came out this year. The State of Us by Sean David Hutchinson. Okay, so now we're going to move away from politics. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit here about a book, the newest book by my favorite author, Cassandra Clare. I've loved every single one of her books since the first one, City of Bones, came out in about 2000. She writes a variety of series, but they're all pretty much set in the same world, the world of the Shadowhunters. I don't know if you might have read some of the others. The good thing about this is that this one starts a new series. So even if you haven't read the other books, you can start with this one. If you have read some of the other books, there might be characters that pop up that you're familiar with. In this case, the main character's name is Cordelia, and her family has just moved to London. This takes place around the turn of the 20th century, so it's about 1903, 1905. Her family has just moved to London, and previously they had moved around a lot, but her father is in some legal trouble, so they need to kind of set down roots and try to find some allies that can help her dad out. In London, they have some family friends. Lucy is Cordelia's best friend, and will be her Parabatai, which is in the Shadowhunter culture. It's it's a best friend. It's also someone who they're tied together magically. Then she also sort of has a long-standing crush on Lucy's older brother James. So within the Shadowhunter world, all Shadowhunters are trained to fight demons. Demons, werewolves, ghosts, the werewolves, they all exist, but are part of the down world. And the Shadowhunters are there to protect humans from them. Demons actually start attacking Shadowhunters during daylight. Normally, demons can't manifest in daylight, so something strange is happening, and Cordelia, James, Lucy, and their friends, they have to figure out what it is, because they think that there's some kind of inside job going on, that there's some other Shadowhunter that knows enough to help the demons attack the Shadowhunters. People are falling ill and sometimes dying. It's a very infectious disease, so it's a really interesting read. The cover could not be more gorgeous, and I can't even tell you how excited I was. This is an advanced reader's copy that I got at a library conference back in February, and my coworkers will actually tell you that when I got this in my hand, I was actually jumping up and down. I was so excited to get this. So it's a really good book. I highly recommend it, but I recommend almost anything by Cassandra Clare. So again, this one is called Chain of Gold. It's the first book in the Last Hour series, and there should be 2 more that start coming out next year. So there you go. And then the very last book that I'm going to talk about to you today is Loki by Mackenzie Lee. If you watch any of the Marvel movies, you probably know the character of Loki. He's honestly one of my favorite characters. He gets really good lines. He's sarcastic. You never really know if he's like going to be good or evil in a particular situation. This story takes place when Loki and Thor are teenagers, and Odin has sent Loki as a form of punishment to Victorian England. So it's basically the same time period as the Cassandra Clare book. So he's been sent to Victorian England to investigate a series of murders that are believed to have been people who have been murdered by Asgardians. There's some kind of magical component to these people because they're considered to be the living dead, not like zombies, but they're unconscious, but they don't appear to be fully dead. They're not breathing, but there's concern that, you know, these people that have these living dead can't be buried because they are still alive. So Loki has been sent by Odin to see what's going on and what the Asgardian connection to this might be. From the movies, you might know that Loki is pretty dismissive of humans or Midgardians. But while he's there for weeks, he starts to realize that, you know, maybe they aren't as weak and worthless as he believes them to be. He starts to develop feelings for one of the people that he's working with, a character named Theo. And he actually even kind of starts to enjoy the life that he's living there in Victorian England. The problem is that he thinks that a childhood friend of his, Amora, might actually be someone who has something to do with these living dead that he's there to investigate. So again, this is Loki by Mackenzie Lee. Normally, a lot of the kind of spin-off stories for superhero movies, whether it's Marvel or DC, they're not great stories. This one is a really great story. It's a good mystery. There's a lot going on. It's very atmospheric, kind of creepy. It's great for this time of year to be reading this. So again, Loki by Mackenzie Lee. Highly recommend it. And that is the last of my books for this virtual book talk. I think someone else will be joining you next Thursday for another book talk, but thank you for listening to this one. And again, if you're interested in any of the titles, there'll be a link attached to this video, so you can just go straight to our catalog and find the title. All the titles will be listed and in whatever format you like. So I hope you enjoy some of them and have a great day. Bye-bye.